Her name was Clara, a 20-year-old university student who lived with her parents and younger brother in a quiet town where everybody seemed to know everyone else's business. Her family was proud of their reputation. Her father, David, was a stern man in his 50s who ran a small construction company. He was respected but feared, known for his uncompromising sense of loyalty and his long memory of grudges. Her mother, Marianne, softer in tone but equally firm in values, managed the household with a sharp eye on appearances. Their son, Daniel, just 16, idolized his father and often parroted his father's words, eager to prove he was a man. Clara was the gentle one in the family. She excelled in her studies, often read novels late into the night, and helped her mother around the house without complaint. Most people in the neighborhood thought she was the perfect daughter, polite, modest, obedient. What no one knew was that she was living a double life, one that had begun quietly and dangerously when she met Alex. Alex was the man her family despised. He was 24, worked in a rival construction firm that had clashed with her father's company for years, and carried a reputation for being reckless. People said that he picked fights, that he was rude, that he didn't respect tradition. Clara's father hated him openly, often muttering that Alex's family were snakes who would cut any throat to win a contract. The feud between the families had lasted nearly a decade, with contracts, clients, and accusations of sabotage fueling the bitterness. Clara never expected to fall for him. She met Alex by accident during a community event 2 summers ago. He had offered her a drink when she spilled hers, and in that brief moment, she realized he wasn't the monster her father had painted. He was direct, sarcastic, but also strangely protective. She tried to stay away, knowing the consequences, but one meeting led to another, and soon they were seeing each other in secret. For months, Clara lived with the weight of that secret. She lied to her mother about study groups, lied to her father about late-night classes, and invented stories to cover the times she slipped away to be with Alex. Every kiss, every conversation felt stolen, fragile. They both knew discovery would mean disaster. And then came the day that Clara's body betrayed her with morning sickness. At first, she dismissed it as exhaustion. But when the test came back positive, she sat frozen on her bed, the little stick clutched in her trembling hands. A storm raged inside her, love for Alex, terror of her father, shame at what her family would say. She pressed the test into her pillow, buried her face, and cried until her throat hurt. She thought of telling Alex first, but even that felt impossible. What if he panicked? What if he left her alone in this? But what terrified her most was the inevitable confrontation with her family. She knew exactly how they would react. Her father would shout. Her mother would collapse in tears. Her brother would look at her with disgust. And yet, the child growing inside her was real. She pressed her hand against her stomach and whispered to herself that no matter what happened, she couldn't deny this life. The story of Clara's family wasn't one of warmth and forgiveness. It was one of rules, loyalty, and enemies who stayed enemies. And now, Clara's secret was about to shatter that world completely. The days after Clara discovered her pregnancy were heavy with silence. She tried to go about her daily routines, but her mind was consumed by fear. Every glance from her parents felt sharper, every question from her brother felt loaded. She wondered if they could already sense the change in her. One evening, at dinner, her father looked at her over his plate. He said that she had been quiet lately, too quiet, and asked if something was wrong at school. Clara froze, her fork halfway to her mouth. She forced a smile and said that everything was fine, just exam stress. Her mother nodded sympathetically, but her father narrowed his eyes, unconvinced. Later that night, her mother came into her room. She sat on the edge of the bed and said softly that she knew her daughter was hiding something. Clara's heart raced. She shook her head quickly, saying that she was just tired, that she had been studying too much. Her mother sighed, brushed Clara's hair from her face, and said that she didn't need to carry burdens alone. Clara nearly broke then. Tears welled in her eyes, and she whispered that she wished she could tell her everything. Her mother pressed her hand and said that whenever she was ready, she would listen. But Clara stayed silent, terrified of the truth. The tension grew worse when her brother Daniel barged into her room the next afternoon. He had seen her throw up in the bathroom and teased her, saying that maybe she had eaten something bad or maybe she was secretly drinking with her friends. Clara snapped, telling him to get out. He laughed and said that he would tell their father she was acting weird. Clara felt her stomach churn, not from nausea but from panic. That evening, when her father came home, Daniel whispered something in his ear. David turned to Clara and said that he hoped she wasn't hiding any shameful behavior. He said that their family had enemies watching, and he wouldn't tolerate disgrace under his roof. Clara's throat tightened, and she excused herself quickly, rushing to her room before the tears could fall. In the darkness of her room, Clara pulled out her phone and texted Alex. She wrote that she couldn't hold it much longer, that she was scared. He replied almost instantly, saying that they would figure it out together. He told her that he loved her, no matter what. Clara stared at his words, wishing she could believe that love would be enough to shield her from her father's wrath. 2 nights later, Clara's mother caught her crying in the kitchen. She said that she couldn't bear to see her daughter like this. She asked if there was a boy. Clara shook her head too quickly, saying no, but her mother's eyes narrowed with suspicion. She said that if there was someone, Clara needed to be careful, because her father would never forgive betrayal. Clara whispered under her breath that sometimes love didn't care about forgiveness. Her mother leaned closer, asking what she meant. Clara panicked, forced a smile, and said nothing. Her mother's eyes lingered on her face, searching, before she let the silence swallow the conversation. The walls of the house seemed to close in tighter each day. Every word her father spoke about enemies, every joke her brother made about shame, every worried glance from her mother, each felt like a knife pressing closer to the secret inside her. And in the middle of all of it, Clara realized the inevitable. The truth couldn't stay hidden forever. At university, Clara tried to act as if nothing was wrong, but the strain showed. She walked slower, often holding her stomach when no one was looking. Her friends noticed. One afternoon in the library, her closest friend Leah leaned across the table and said that Clara seemed pale, thinner, almost fragile. Clara laughed it off, saying she hadn't been sleeping well. Leah studied her for a moment and then said that if she needed to talk, she was there. But Clara couldn't bring herself to say the words. The thought of speaking them aloud, "I'm pregnant," felt like opening a floodgate she would never be able to close. At home, the stress seeped into every corner. Daniel grew nosier, throwing sly comments whenever she avoided meals or stayed in her room too long. He said that maybe she was sick, maybe worse, maybe she was seeing someone their father would never approve of. Clara snapped at him one evening, saying that he should mind his own business. He grinned and said that if she was hiding something, the whole family would know soon enough. Her mother, meanwhile, watched her closely. She often asked about her classes, her friends, even her appetite. Clara answered carefully, but Marianne's eyes always seemed to probe deeper, as if searching for cracks in her daughter's words. One night, when Clara excused herself early from dinner, her mother whispered to her father that she was worried Clara was keeping a dangerous secret. Clara overheard from the hallway, her heart pounding so hard she thought they might hear it. In the small town where they lived, whispers spread faster than truth. Neighbors began to notice Clara's absence at social gatherings. Mrs. Hughes, who lived across the street, told Marianne that she had seen Clara walking alone at night, once even getting into a car she didn't recognize. Marianne dismissed it politely, but when she repeated the comment to her husband, his jaw tightened. He said that if Clara was sneaking around, it could only mean trouble. Clara felt the weight of those whispers when she went to the corner store one evening. 2 women from church stood near the register, their voices low but sharp. One said that Clara didn't look well. The other replied that sometimes daughters carried shame their parents tried to hide. Clara kept her head down, her face burning, as she paid for her things and left quickly. At school, Leah cornered her again. She said that she had heard rumors, that people were saying Clara was involved with someone her family despised. Clara's heart skipped. She asked what people were saying exactly. Leah hesitated, then said that she had overheard two classmates whispering that Clara had been seen with Alex outside the bus station. Clara's blood ran cold. She asked if Leah had told anyone. Leah shook her head and said no, but warned that if others had noticed, it was only a matter of time before her family did too. That night, Clara sat on her bed with her phone in her hand, staring at Alex's name on the screen. She typed and deleted a dozen messages before finally writing that rumors were spreading, that she was terrified. He replied that none of it mattered, that they just needed to be strong together. He said that he wasn't afraid of her father or anyone else. Clara wished she could share his courage. But every time she heard her father's heavy footsteps in the hallway, every time Daniel tossed a smirk her way, every time her mother sighed in worry, Clara felt herself breaking apart inside. Even the simplest moments, helping her mother fold laundry, sitting in class, walking home from the store, became shadowed by dread. Every ordinary scene in her life now carried the weight of the secret growing quietly inside her. And somewhere beyond her walls, beyond her routines, the whispers continued to spread. Clara's mother was the first to voice her suspicions out loud. One evening, while folding laundry in the living room, Marianne said that she thought Clara might be ill. She said that she had noticed her daughter's pale complexion, her frequent trips to the bathroom, her tired eyes. She said that maybe it was something serious, anemia, or even worse. Clara overheard the conversation from the staircase, her breath catching in her throat. David's response was sharp. He said that illness wasn't the problem, that Clara's behavior looked more like guilt than sickness. He said that he had seen her avoiding his eyes, slipping out of the house, returning late. He said that no illness made someone hide their phone or flinch at every question. Marianne frowned, telling him not to jump to conclusions. She said that their daughter was a good girl, not the kind to bring shame. But David shook his head and muttered that people said the same thing until the truth came crashing down. The next day, Marianne cornered Clara gently. She said that if she was sick, she had to tell them, because hiding an illness only made it worse. Clara's hands trembled as she insisted she was fine, just tired from school. Marianne studied her face, then sighed and said that secrets had a way of hurting more than the truth. That evening, David brought up a different suspicion entirely. He said that he had heard from a client that Alex had been seen around town more often. He said that Alex was trouble, that if Clara had anything to do with him, it would be a betrayal. Marianne dismissed the idea quickly, saying their daughter was too smart to get mixed up with someone like that. But David's eyes narrowed, and he said he wasn't so sure anymore. The false tracks multiplied. Marianne pressed Clara about doctor's appointments, hinting at illness. She left pamphlets about women's health in her daughter's room, quietly hoping Clara would confess if it was medical. Clara hid them in a drawer, her guilt stabbing deeper with each page. David, on the other hand, prowled the house with suspicion. He asked Daniel if he had seen Clara with anyone. Daniel smirked and said that he thought she was sneaking around, but he wasn't sure with who. That was enough for David. He muttered that enemies came in many forms, and Alex's name was never far from his lips. One Saturday morning, Clara's worst fear nearly came true. Her father asked her directly if she was seeing someone. His tone was cold, his eyes hard. Clara's throat closed, and she shook her head quickly, saying no. He leaned closer and said that if he ever found out she was lying, there would be no forgiveness. Marianne, watching from across the room, stepped in and said that David was being too harsh. She said that their daughter was under stress, not in sin. She tried to reassure Clara with her eyes, but the damage was done. Clara fled to her room, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, the household stood divided. The mother believed her daughter was hiding sickness. The father believed she was hiding betrayal. The son fed both fires with his careless remarks. And Clara, caught between their suspicions, realized that the walls of her secret were closing in. The false tracks had delayed the truth, but they could not stop it from crashing into the open. It happened on a night when the air itself felt heavy with unspoken words. Clara sat at the dinner table, picking at her food while her parents exchanged sharp glances across from her. Daniel filled the silence with careless chatter until David cut him off with a wave of his hand. He turned to Clara and said that enough was enough. He said that he wanted the truth now, tonight. Clara froze, her fork slipping from her fingers. She asked what truth he meant. David slammed his hand against the table and said that he knew she was hiding something, that he wasn't a fool. He said that he had asked around town, that he had heard her name whispered alongside Alex's. His voice grew louder with every word until the entire house seemed to shake with it. Marianne stood quickly, her voice trembling as she begged him to stop. She said that accusing their daughter like that would only drive her away. But David wasn't listening. He turned back to Clara and demanded that she look him in the eye and tell him there was nothing between her and Alex. Clara's heart pounded so loudly she thought it would break through her chest. Her lips trembled, and no words came out. David saw the hesitation and exploded. He shouted that he would not allow betrayal under his roof, not from his own daughter. He shouted that Alex's family had tried to ruin him for years, and now his own blood had sided with the enemy. Marianne clutched Clara's arm, whispering that she needed to say something, anything, to calm him down. But Clara's tears betrayed her before her lips could form an answer. David stormed out of the house, his footsteps pounding against the porch until the door slammed shut. Marianne collapsed into a chair, covering her face with her hands. Daniel stood frozen, wide-eyed, before muttering under his breath that he had known it all along. Clara fled to her room, sobbing into her pillow, her whole body shaking. For 3 days, David did not come home. He stayed at a friend's house across town, too angry to return, too wounded to face Clara. Meanwhile, Marianne begged her daughter to explain. She said that if there was something between her and Alex, it had to stop, that nothing good could come from it. Clara shook her head through tears and whispered that it was too late to stop. Marianne's face went white as the meaning sank in. She said that Clara couldn't possibly mean what she thought. Clara buried her face in her hands, unable to speak. Marianne stood there, torn between fury and heartbreak. She said that her husband would never forgive this, that their family would never recover. But the truth had already begun to slip beyond the walls of the home. A neighbor saw Clara meeting Alex near the edge of town and told David. Fueled by rage, David confronted Alex in the middle of the street, shouting that he had ruined his daughter and shamed his house. Alex stood firm, saying that he loved Clara, that he hadn't set out to disgrace anyone. David lunged at him, and the two had to be pulled apart by bystanders. Word spread fast. Soon, Clara couldn't step outside without feeling the weight of eyes on her. People whispered, pointing, saying that she had betrayed her family, that she had chosen the enemy. Despite the shame and the whispers, Clara met Alex again. She told him through tears that she was pregnant, that the storm had already broken, that there was no way to hide anymore. Alex's eyes widened, and for a moment he was silent. Then he took her hands and said that he wasn't going to run. He said that they would face this together, no matter how much her father hated him. But even as he said it, Clara's heart twisted with fear. She could believe in Alex's courage, but could she believe in her family's forgiveness? Every day the tension grew heavier, every night her father's absence stretched longer, and every encounter with Alex only deepened the divide. The climax had arrived, but the ending was still unwritten. The house no longer felt like a home. Days stretched into weeks, and David still hadn't returned. Sometimes he called Marianne late at night, his voice low and strained, asking if Clara had admitted the truth. Other times, he didn't call at all. The silence was worse than his anger. It felt like a punishment, one that hung over them all. Marianne carried herself like a woman torn in two. On one side was her loyalty to her husband, the man she had built a life with, the man who saw Alex as their enemy. On the other side was the daughter she loved, the daughter who now carried a child in secret. She wanted to protect them both, but the walls were closing in. Daniel avoided Clara most of the time, though his smirks and muttered remarks hadn't stopped. One afternoon he passed her in the hallway and said that soon the whole town would see the truth written on her body. Clara turned away quickly, her cheeks burning with shame. The whispers outside the home grew louder. Neighbors no longer greeted Marianne warmly in the market. Friends crossed the street rather than walk beside Clara. Every interaction carried the weight of judgment, and every judgment pushed Clara deeper into isolation. And yet, in the quiet corners of that isolation, Alex's voice lingered. He came to see her when he could, sometimes sneaking into the park at night, sometimes waiting at the edge of the road near her school. Each time, he promised her the same thing, that he loved her, that he wouldn't abandon her, that the baby would not grow up unloved. Clara clung to those words like lifelines, though doubt always gnawed at her heart. One night, Marianne confronted Clara directly. She said that she knew, that she had seen enough to understand. She asked if it was true, if Alex was the father of the child. Clara's lips trembled, and tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered yes. Marianne's hands shook as she covered her face. She said that she had prayed it wouldn't be true, but now there was no denying it. She said that when David returned, he would never accept it, never forgive it. Clara fell to her knees, begging her mother not to tell him, not yet. Marianne knelt beside her, holding her tightly, both of them crying. She said that she would protect her daughter, but she couldn't promise protection forever. The days blurred after that. David still hadn't returned, but his absence felt like a storm waiting to break. Alex continued to insist that they would face it together, but Clara could see the fear in his eyes. Her mother carried the weight of the secret, but her silence grew heavier by the day. And Clara herself, she stood at the center of it all, caught between loyalty and love, fear and hope, family and future. One evening, she sat alone on the porch, the sunset burning red across the sky. She placed her hand on her stomach and whispered to the life growing inside her. She said that she didn't know what would happen, that she didn't know if her family would stand by her or turn away. She said that she didn't know if Alex's promises would hold, or if her father's anger would consume them all. The wind carried no answers. Only silence. And so the story remained suspended, teetering on the edge of revelation and ruin, with no certainty of where it would fall.